guide your journey into Cabernet Sauvignon magnificence. Hello and welcome to Dan Really Likes Wine, a series that over 6+ years we've filmed in some very different and slightly non-wine-like places, from sitting on a beach in the Seychelles to a very chilly and windy corner of Ireland. We've been in Mauritius, we've been in Scotland, we've been in all sorts of places. This is the first time though that I find myself sitting outside a butchery. What on earth am I doing at a butchery for filming a wine show? Well, this is Northern Meat Purveyors, and it started as just a butchery, but it's run by a Portuguese guy called Johnny and his son Ronaldo, and not unsurprisingly for the Portuguese, they're a very entrepreneurial pair, and they're a pair who absolutely love their wine. And so, driven in particular by Ronaldo, who's become one of South Africa's leading Portuguese wine experts, when you walk in, you'll find loads of fabulous meat to the right, but to the left, a really cool and eclectic selection of wine at some really good prices. So I thought I'd drop by, do some exploring and match some biltong with some really good wine. It's not all I'm doing on the show this week though. There are a couple of people to catch up with. I'm going to be speaking to the great Chris Alheit, the man we know as Butch, and getting a sense of the wine that he makes, why he makes it, and what makes his approach to wine quite so special. But first of all, the wine you'll actually find in here at the Northern Meat Purveyors. It is Mike Ratcliffe's Vilafonté and the brand new Series M. If you work your way through the South African wine calendar, you'll find there are certain dates that tend to stand out. They're the dates of the wine days, and there are plenty of those. And they're dates of major wine events. We've got a few of them as well. And then there are the dates of the key releases. And if you happen to be in Johannesburg in particular, November 1 is one that goes into the diary on November 2 for the following year, because it is traditionally the release of what has become one of South Africa's most iconic wines, and in a relatively short space of time to give it that title. The wine in question comes from Vilafonté, and the man behind it is part winemaking guru, part wine marketing genius, and all good-natured fun early morning for some wine tasting. Mike Ratcliffe, lovely to see you.
Good morning, Dan.
Is the 1st of November a national holiday yet? Because it should be.
Well, we're pushing very hard to get that done. It's also a day that we've often disappointed people because it's the release of allocation day. So, yeah, it's a big day in the world of Vilafonté.
And in many ways, that's almost as important as tasting the wine itself today, that story of the allocation, because I think you guys headlined that charge into creating a space where you've got people queuing up to get hold of a South African fine wine.
Well, it's massively humbling, as you can imagine, because simply we grow grapes and we make wine to the best of our ability. And so when we see people falling in love with the wine over years, and people looking to complete their collections every single year, it gives an incredible sense of pride and achievement. And, you know, we're very grateful for all the people that stand in line.
In terms of how you've got to where you are today, I'm sure there was a degree of vision when you started, but would you have seen the Vilafonté brand getting, in such a short space of time in wine terms, to where it is now as quickly as it has?
Well, you know the term overnight success. This year we celebrate 25 years since our vineyard was planted. So I guess in the world of wine, it is quick. It's not 15 generations, but 25 years has been a slog. It's been lots of hard work, and I think probably the secret to our success has been an absolute focus. You know, we don't do much. We don't do a huge range of wines, but what we do, we try to do to the best of our ability. And I think that that's been recognized by wine lovers out there. And like I said earlier, it's humbling.
In terms of creating the wine you did, we've had a similar conversation in the past, but I think it's important to restate it. Two key factors. One was finding the right place to get these grapes from to create wine that, as the world has seen, is genuinely outstanding, but then also finding the right people to do it with. And you got a couple of Americans who kind of knew what they were doing.
Yes, I mean, 25 years with Zelma and Phil has been amazing. It's been probably most amazing for me because I've had 25 years of learning. I think if you can surround yourself with people that are smarter than you, you're going to go probably a lot further than the other way around. There's never been a year when I haven't learned something from them, which has been amazing. But similarly, the team that I've created underneath me at Vilafonté now are a team of passionate intellects who are constantly challenging the status quo, and they are the next generation of people that are really building out the future of Vilafonté, and that's super exciting for me.
This, for the first time ever on Dan Really Likes Wine, and pretty much anywhere else, is the brand new Series C from Vilafonté. The wine has been poured, but just before we try it, again, a combination of the marketing and packaging with some common sense and some practicalities. When you pull off the label, you actually find there's some information inside. Talk me through what's there, Mike.
Well, we realized that most of the times when our clients are opening the wine, the client would either be a consumer or a sommelier, and they often don't have the information that they need to wow their guests. And so what we do is we literally, firstly, we put a maturation graph on the back with some recommendations about exactly when they should probably be drinking the wine. Secondly, obvious things like percentages, because we don't put that on the bottle, and cellaring temperatures, things like that. But it's an opportunity for the sommelier or the collector to very quickly have a couple of nuggets in their hand that they can wow their guests with. And people like it, and they do pay attention. For those that are slightly more nerdy, we have a QR code which you can scan, which takes you to a video of us actually talking about the wine and giving them much more in-depth information. And we can actually track how many people watch the video, and it's a lot.
I'm looking at that optimal drinking graph, and this tells me I should be drinking this in kind of 2050.
Well, I mean, the wine is conceived in a way that it's not a fast-moving consumer good. We like to position ourselves as the antithesis of that. At a minimum for Vilafonté, we'd like to see our clients planning an occasion, bringing in a great friend, thinking a little bit about what they're going to eat, and maybe having a little bit of anticipation about drinking the wine and creating an occasion around it. But at the other side, we've got every vintage we've ever produced in stock and in very good stock. And there's not one wine of the Series Cs that we've ever produced that has yet reached the stage when we are recommending that you should now drink it. So the wine does have longevity, which is not everybody's cup of tea. A lot of people want to drink the wines tonight, and then this wine possibly is not for them. On the other hand, we have a lot of clients who do buy the wine and drink it young. They love it. That's their choice. That's okay.
Well, this is the 2020. It's less Cabernet Sauvignon pronounced than its immediate predecessor. I can think a few better things, Michael, for breakfast on a Thursday than a glass of new Vilafonté.
Lovely.
I can attempt to talk through it, but I'll let you do it. You've changed the makeup for reasons that between you and your winemaking team, you've obviously felt this is the optimal combination of what we've got. How then does this make it a particularly special wine for you?
Well, firstly, it's an ongoing evolution. So I think change is strong, an evolution into something that we consider to be slightly better. We've also got building blocks that we think have changed. Our vineyard is much older than it was now. It's more established. The roots are much deeper. And so we're getting a different expression. But it's also not carved in stone. You know, next year it could change again, which it may well do. 2020 was a fantastic year. I still remember the joy in my team, in Zelma and Chris, when the grapes came in the most nerdy fashion, when they were looking at these tiny little grapes, sending them off for analysis and coming back with levels of anthocyanin and polyphenols that they'd never seen before. So on paper, from day one, it was always going to be a rock star vintage. But of course, the old adage that wine gets made in the vineyard is cute, but it's complete rubbish. You know, a winemaker is an artist, and a winemaker should be able to massively enhance and nurture and create a wine into something that is a much bigger potential than just the grapes that arrived. And I think that they've done a good job in this. You should also recall that this is what I call PC, pre-COVID. Because of our, by design, early harvest date, we started harvesting very early in February. We were finished on the 22nd of February. Our entire vintage was barreled down by the 26th of March, after which, the very next day, COVID lockdowns were announced. So it was fortuitous in that sense. And, I raised my glass to all those winemakers who got caught out by COVID and still had grapes hanging in the vineyard. But this 2020 Vilafonté Series C is PC.
Is there any, in closing, Mike, is there any possibility for people to still get onto that allocation list? Can they join the queue? Is there any space at all?
Well, we are fully allocated pre-release. The Series C Alheit is often referred to as Baby C, so that is unallocated, so that is available. The top retailers and restaurants in South Africa all have allocations, so if you have a relationship with a good retailer in South Africa, the chances are that they will have stock pre-release. So that's the best place to go. Failing that, we do have a waiting list on our website, vilafonté.com, and spaces open up over time. People leave, they die, they get divorced, and gaps open up. So we are consciously not in the business of restricting supply. We're not trying to be clever about it. What we're trying to do is equitable and make the wine available to as big a band of consumers as possible. But unfortunately, there's not enough to go around for now.
And the reason for that is because this is a wine brand that, whether it's IWSC naming Vilafonté world's best red wine producer, or numerous others giving it all manner of awards, it has struck a chord right around the world in the fine wine space and continues to do South Africa proud. That's exactly what the 2020 vintage is doing. Yes, it's certainly very young at the moment, but it's got a very bright future. If you can get hold of some, sell anything, sell the car, sell the house, sell the children, get hold of your Vilafonté, keep it for 15, 20 years, and you'll have some South African magic to look forward to. Drinking Vilafonté for breakfast with Mike Ratcliffe in Sandton. When the mayor of Stellenbosch comes to town, he does things in style. And as we said there in that conversation with Mike, it's not quite as huge and big and overwhelming a wine as you might think. There's certainly a majesty to it, but it's a little bit more restrained, a little more held back, and I think all the better for it. It's also not easy to get. There are 3 bottles as I stand here today. By the time you watch this, you've probably gone, but you never know. Get on down and you might just find them and be able to get hold of Mike's latest Vilafonté vintage. Amongst a whole pile of some really interesting red wine, some stuff that's pretty mainstream, the Nicholas from Boschendal, which is becoming increasingly popular. Jacques down at Boschendal has struck a beautiful chord there with that particular red blend, but there are Grenaches and Syrahs and Pinot Noirs and all sorts in between. A couple of the Constantia blends, that 5, and the other Constantia 3, which I think is a very underrated red blend, doing a great job down at Constantia Glen, which is always such a beautiful place to visit. And the great thing about this is choose your meat, pair it with wine, choose your wine, pair it with meat. You can do both of them at exactly the same time. Now, one of the wines you don't find here at the moment, it'll probably pop up soon enough, is the wine of Chris Alheit. And the reason you probably don't find it here is because it's hard to find it anywhere. Butcher's wine sells out really quickly. His reputation as one of the finest South African winemakers, indeed one of the finest young winemakers in the world, just grows with every passing vintage. So I sat down with Chris to get an idea of how he and his wife, also a winemaker, came together to create in Alheit one of South Africa's defining brands. Now, if I told you that I was going to be chatting to a tough, rugged, strangely good-looking athlete called Butch, you'd probably think, well, you've got Butch James on the show, and what on earth does he know about wine? Well, Butch actually does know a bit about wine, mostly the drinking thereof, but it's a different athlete I have on the show instead. It wasn't Chris and Butch, but that's what everybody knows him as now. Chris Alheit, welcome to the show.
Hello, Dan. It's good to be here.
Let's get the name origin out the way. Where did Butch first emerge?
Standard 6, now called grade 8. I was just a terrific prop forward, as you can imagine. And my neck, shoulders and arms grew out a little bit before the rest of me. So I resembled a bulldog, which I still sort of do. And one of my teammates had a pet bulldog called Mr. Butch. And then my name was Mr. Butch for about a week, and then it was Butch. And now even my wife and kids know me as Butch. So since I was 13, bro.
Is it one of those situations where it's only your mother who now calls you Chris?
Yeah, she doesn't even call me Chris. She calls me like Liffy or whatever she calls me. Yeah, Chris. She does call me Chris, actually. Oh, pretty much.
All right. Well, look, we're very happy to have Butch on the show with that little hint of a slightly better looking, more athletic Stephen Kitshoff to you.
Thank you. Not quite as flaming and gloriously ginger, but I do have a bit of strawberry in the beard.
In this morning light.
Yeah.
And it's light that's catching your wine brilliantly, and that is why we're catching up with you. You've braved Johannesburg and ventured north for an occasion that I'm not sure even you understand is quite so big for the local wine industry, because the wine that you've created, the name that you have, people get seriously excited when there are new releases of yours coming out.
Yeah, I'm not sure what to say to that. It's a big blessing. We're very happy that that's the case, and that we still feel a little bit stunned sometimes that people get so excited about our project, but we're very grateful. Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about the journey through the wines that you're making now under your own name, because there were various steps along the journey until then. But it's quite a brave venture. It's one most winemakers want to get to, but still quite a brave one to go out on your own. And yet, in a relatively short space of time, it's been a proper fairy tale.
Thanks, Dan. How much time do we have? Because it's quite a long story. I'll try to give you the condensed version. Basically, I met Suzanne, my wife, at Stellenbosch University when we were both students. She was actually the first girl that I met on the first day of first year, and it's a long story, but I'm very grateful that she is my wife.
Was she as smitten with you as you were with her?
Well, she was following me around all the time, so probably. No, I'm just kidding. At Stellenbosch, they used to do these things where the two boarding houses would get together, and then they'd have to do this thing called skarkel. Is where you have to go and link up with the girl and walk with her it was the dean's address on the first day of the first year. And, all the Simonsburg guys, I was in Simon, lined up, and all the Monica girls lined up. It's a bit weird. But anyway, I saw her, and obviously I wasn't the only guy that saw her, because, when they said skarkel, I made a beeline for her, and I had to hand off a couple of guys to get there first, but I did get there first, and I grabbed her and we walked. And I didn't see her again for quite a while after that, but that's a long story. But so it's actually really the story of the two of us, and of our studies together, and then our travels together. We traveled quite a bit together. The beautiful thing about wine is that you get to make wine in some of the most amazing parts of the world. We worked together in California, in Western Australia, in France, in Germany, and during those travels we just had some extremely formative kind of experiences that really cemented the wine philosophy that, more than a decade later, we're still adhering to very strictly now. So many things have happened along the way, but if I could sum it up, I would say that what we're trying to do is make very, very South African wine in South Africa. That might seem like an odd thing to say, but, not many people fully appreciate the reality that we have not just our own soil and our own climate in this country, but that we have vineyard DNA that goes a long, long way back, hundreds of years back, and that just due to massal selection in the vineyards, there has been a genetic drift away from the original type. So we have our own DNA. We have very South African Chenin here, South African Semillon. So our mission is to try to present the world with something that really can't be made in any other country. That's our thing.
You've also got very South African winemakers, and in the case of your brand, two of you together. And we're at a stage, I think, where most people are moving away from, well, we're trying to make wine in the manner of how the French might have made it, or somebody who does a grape that we've inherited, but I think improved on. And I realised that, well, this is South African. Let's make it and be proudly South African about it.
Well, that's the thing. I think we're in a very, very interesting sort of era now in the history of Cape wine, as I understand it, and my understanding is by no means perfect. We've only really been making our own wines for the last 10 or 12 years, but we're basically in what you could call a post-cooperative era now, and that's been defined by the re-evaluation of resources that we previously thought weren't worth very much, like all these, like a sea of old vine Chenin, and some of it just by fluke and by providence planted in really good spots. And we were part of a generation of people that were really actively seeking out those old treasures, with which we could, if you want to make something authentic, you need that to be qualified by heritage. So we were trying to find those items of heritage, those artifacts of heritage with which to start. And now that's really been like the foundational message, is that we've got great stuff. We don't need to cringe over the old vine Chenin that we have. We should reevaluate it and think to ourselves, well, we've got something here that that other countries would dream of having, would love to have, and if we could just see it in the right light, So So that's been the story of what we've done.
Well, I think we are seeing it increasingly in that light, and
Yeah.
you are a big part of that, and we've got some of it to try in a second. I do need to understand, though, how the process works in terms of, in my house, my wife tells me what I've done wrong, then tells me what to do right, I apologise, and we move forward. And I suspect that's how most marriages work. You guys are trying to make wine together on top of all the other challenges of being a married couple.
Yes.
Occasionally, does the honeymoon just falter ever so slightly?
Ever so slightly, Dan, ever so slightly, but nothing to worry about. But so, look, the reality is we started out together, and as I said, we had these incredible shared formative experiences traveling the world with wine, and so we have a very strong shared philosophy on what wine should and shouldn't be. The year we released our first wine, Cartology 2011, our daughter was born a month or two before that, and Suzanne's interest shifted very quickly from vineyards and wine to being a mom. And we had 3 kids in relatively quick succession, and she is a very, very dedicated and outstanding mother. So she's been off the playing field for a few years with the wine thing. I'm sure she'll come back on when the youngest is through his kind of very important early years. But to get her back into the winery now, I mean, I don't think wild horses could drag her away from her kids right now. I've sort of been on my own for a bit.
In fairness, the understudy's done a reasonable job. So
we've had a few wonderful understudies. One of whom is Franco Lawrence, who's got his own wines, and I highly recommend that you guys look out for his wines. Lawrence family, very good. And we've got a youngster now called Gabriel Dubois, who's just absolute star. So we've had very good youngsters helping us out for the last 10 years. Yeah.
Well, with due apology, by understudy, I was referring to yourself, but we will congratulate them as well.
Thanks, Dan. Sorry I missed you there. But,
let's have a look at this wine.
Okay.
The first of them, the Cartology. And I know, because she's lovely and she watches all of them, but my mother is going to be watching this particularly.
Oh, Dan's mum, hello.
She and her husband drink this by the gallon. So if you're in the Belfast region and there are nude pensioners running up and down the beach again,
I'll know who they are.
That would be Helen and Philip, my apologies. And probably Cartology fueled. There are other wines that have perhaps gone on, like the 2 we drink now, to get perhaps a higher status or have been seen in a more revered light. But this one, given the bedrock it played in your role, I'm guessing is really special for you.
It's very special for me. It's pretty much my baby, and because of the very minimalistic approach we take to winemaking, and based on that kind of pure philosophy that we have of what you can and can't do with wine, blending Cartology and putting it together out of these fantastic old vineyards that I have is one of my favorite parts of the year. It's really awesome to try to find the wine, within all of these wonderful parcels and different soils, shale and granite and red granite and red sandstone, and they all have completely different personalities. And just wonderful in their own right, but then to try to make the wine of the vintage, if you know what I mean. So Cartology really is my baby, and the only reason it's less expensive than the other wine, or some of the other wines, is that I can make it at relative scale compared to the others. And when I say scale, it was pretty tiny, but relative to the other wines, I can make a little bit more of it. Yeah.
And I know because I've tried for about 3 years to get an allocation, and I'm still on a waiting list.
I need to get you on the mailing list. Sorry, mate.
No, right. So that kind of that sets the scene. If you've never had Alheit wine, then trying the Cartology gives you the introduction. But it's very much an introduction because the story goes on a long way from there. Many more chapters than the other 2 we'll try now. But give me the first of those. Fire by Night.
Fire by Night is the first of the other 2, and the second one is Nautical Dawn. And we can go into those names if you like.
Fire away. Fire by Night. Talk me through it.
Fire by Night. So both of these are granite soil wines. So I'm going to need a minute here. So basically with Cartology, as the project kept on developing, we started noticing patterns in the vineyards. And I've mentioned how different the different soils are, the kind of wines they make. And I got to the point in 2017 when I really, really wanted to sort of show my hand, if you will. I wanted to show what we really have, and I released 5 single vineyard Chenin's that year along with Cartology. And it was quite a breakthrough year for us, building on what we had as a foundation. This year we only have 2 single vineyard Chenin's, unfortunately. It's just difficult, from vintage to vintage always to bottle every single vineyard. But what I want to show you here is that we have 2 vineyards, right? They're both on granite soils. They're both planted in the late 70s. They're both old, dry farm bush vines. Fire by Night belongs to us. It's on a farm that we've purchased. Nautical Dawn doesn't. It's on a farm on the False Bay coast of Stellenbosch. So here you have mountainside Swartland, and here you have seaside Stellenbosch. And they couldn't be more different. Same winery, same winemaker, same philosophy, same processes. And this is where Old Vine Chenin for me becomes so exciting, because it's so obviously a really excellent vehicle for expressing the land. So we can have our own heritage grape, in our own place, that can express our landscape very articulately. That's really cool. The names, I suppose. Fire by Night is a biblical name. It just implies like a guiding light. When the Lord led the Israelites out of Egypt, he appeared as a pillar of cloud by day and fire by night. So that was where the name came from, because of legends like Ardi and Eben and these guys that had the part of, you know, these boys that had the Paardeberg as their home, and that whole mountain was just this beacon of a really good way to go for the Cape. And Nautical Dawn, an odd name. It's the middle phase of dawn. Dawn is comprised of astrological dawn, nautical dawn, and civilian dawn. And nautical dawn is when it's light enough to see what you're doing on your boat, but dark enough to navigate. And I wanted a name that took people, to the sea and facing east, which is what the vineyard is doing. So long story.
I had no idea
those
of that.
are the names, yeah.
This has been a learning process. Well, I'll teach you something.
Stick around,
and that is that you've got an unlikely fan in this particular wine, because last year for his birthday, the rock star and captain of probably the least seaworthy vessel in the Cape, Ard Matthews of Just Ginger.
Right, yeah.
Ard joined me for lunch. I took him out for lunch to our own house on his birthday.
Oh, great place.
We had a bottle of Nautical Dawn, and he fell absolutely head over heels in love.
Oh, that's good to know.
The single finest wine he'd ever had.
Wow, thanks, Art.
It might have been the only wine he's had that didn't come in a box, but I think still to get that thumbs up from Mr. Matthews was a nice one.
Thanks, Art. Appreciate that. Good man.
Look, some more lovely wine, and I'm going to try very hard. In fact, I'm just going to WhatsApp you and email you every day until I get on that list. And I'd advise you all to do the same once I've done it, but only afterwards. Because what you've got with Chris Alheit is a combination of a lot of things he mentioned earlier: a wonderful terroir, the great South African DNA of the vines, the ability to interpret different terroir so brilliantly, and the Fire by Night and the Nautical Dawn do express that. But what you've also got is somebody who, like we have so often in South Africa, but I think even higher than most in this case, somebody's taken the art of winemaking and perhaps with a little tuition from his wife, turned it into a real art form, and in the case of Chenin Blanc, given us something that's an absolute South African treasure. And what I love about hanging out with Chris Alheit is that he's just so much fun to talk wine with. Doesn't take himself too seriously, even though right around the world people scramble to get hold of his wine. And it's wine which I mentioned earlier wasn't available at Northern Meat Purveyors. Well, that's mostly but not entirely true. There's none of the actual Alheit, none of the Fire by Dawn or the Lazarus, the radio wine that's almost impossible to find anyway. There is, though, a bottle or two, perhaps, if you get here quick enough, that comes under the Carinus label, where Chris has been the winemaker. If you can find that, then you are in for a treat. And that sits amongst, again, a really wide-ranging selection of white, from the fairly entry-level Stellenbosch Vineyards Chenin that finished top 10 last year. It is an exceptional wine, particularly for its price, all the way up to the top end of Chenin and Ken Forrester's FMC, available in a few small batches. Along with a load of bubbles, I found a Silverthorn today out of Robertson, again doing something really, really cool. But I'll leave it to you to come down and find out about the wine. Ask for Ronaldo, ask for Johnny, load up with some of the best biltong in Johannesburg, have a look at a small but really carefully chosen wine selection, and meet some Portuguese guys who love wine and meat in equal measure. That's Dan Really Likes Wine for this week. We'll see you again next week. Goodbye.